we also look at the social side. So our report encompasses both the social aspects and some of the economic aspects. I'm saying some because it may not be all, because we've got other areas, other commissions which were dealing the same, like a commission on land and so on. So, comrades, what I'm going to do, just because also of the time pressures, we're going to go straight to what are the key messages we are bringing for resolution. We are not going to, do the usual noting, believing, and therefore resolve. But the final resolution will do obviously cover those opening contexts for our resolution. So, but just to say important points that were highlighted at the meeting, I think one of the important message was that whatever specific interventions we are proposing as a party, we do that out of a full awareness and understanding that much of what we are proposing will depend on class struggle, on us organizing on the ground, be rooted among our communities, at the workplace, in the state, and all other sides of struggle. And in the title of our Congress, will depend on a powerful socialist movement of the workers and the poor. So it's not that without that, much of what we are proposing may just be on paper, given the unfavorable balance of forces in the current situation. Comrades, we have analyzed and we concur with the characterization of the current state of the South African economy, a capitalist economy in crisis, and we identified all those multiple crises, the triple challenges, but as well as the consequences of those crises in terms of social reproduction. The crisis of food, of the rising cost of living, of almost everything or every commodity we buy, especially food, which is now becoming a problem of food poverty, of hunger, of food insecurity, so to say. And we also acknowledge the impact of that on the...
Sorry, comrade David. There's just one announcement that needs to be made by the Electoral Commission. Comrade Mandla.
Thanks, comrade. We just want to announce to all of you, the voting is closing at 12 o'clock noon now. If you have not voted by 12 o'clock, you won't be allowed to vote again for this session. Then now, all those who have not voted, please come straight to the voting room and cast your vote. 12 o'clock, we are closing. Thank you.
Okay, comrades, I will then move to the key areas where we at least have something to say. Other than that, a lot of what we are saying, we are basically endorsing the broad thrust of the discussion document and elements of the political report that deals with the economy. The first, comrades, is with regard to the public sector. We are we have, as I've said, straight to the resolutions. One of the important points we are raising there, comrades, the first one is that we need to move towards shifting away from corporatization of state entities or state-owned enterprises, such as ESCO, which are now will be expected, while they are still state, but they will be expected to behave and conduct in the same way as private companies, meaning looking at short-term interest, short-term profits, and little by little reducing their developmental mandate to our people. So we're saying that that is one area we are looking at, so that state enterprises do not, you don't find there's no difference between a private company and a public entity, that citizens are treated as clients or customers. The second point, comrades, is that we need to the state must create a funding and a supportive framework for state-owned enterprises, which should include also a combination of fiscal and monetary policy support, including imposing prescribed investments, development investments from the financial sector to support structural transformation, economic transformation. So in other words, we say the current funding model for state enterprises leaves much to be desired. The third point is that even in the current context, we need to emphasize state-led investments, especially in the critical area of infrastructure. What we are seeing now is an encroachment of neoliberal models of investments, something called blended finance, in which basically it looks like the state is subsidizing the private sector in that context. So state-led public investments means that it is the state that direct and also take forward, an investment approach. It's not private sector-led investment. And this should include areas like massive renewal energy projects, including research and development in clean technology solutions, such as other comrades have been talking about coal. The discussion document mentioned things like coal, clean coal energy. The issue of infrastructure should include public transport, safe public transport, to support working class needs, but also to support industrialization, to build public support in a form of public trains, public buses, and other public modes of transport. We should also enter the area of digital technology, of connectivity, so that we are in a better place to combat the high cost of data, access to data, including free Wi-Fi access, prioritizing working class communities in the urban and the rural areas. The second area we discussed was around the financial sector, which also predominated the political report, where there was a reference, for instance, of the high concentration of the financial sector in oligopolies, literally the monopolies, both in banking, insurance, and that we need to begin to answer to that. So our resolution here, because I want to go straight there, is that also, okay, before I look at that, I think I should just mention that we also look at the issue of financialization, which, as I've said, dominated our discussion document, but also the political report. That we need to develop some regulatory obligations for financial institutions, whether they are banks, whether they are insurance, whether they are pensions, institutions and things like that, to invest through a policy that has been a long party and movement policy of prescribed assets or prescribed investments. And that to take it forward, let us reiterate our call we made at the 14th National Congress that we convene a conference on prescribed investment strategy where we will involve key players like PIC, like IDC, like the trade union movements, because a lot of us in the union movement are represented in this pension trusts and so on. And that we also need to not only defend, but also to work towards a developmental public banking sector. We know that comrades like Comrade Masondo, in his capacity in the finance, one of the tasks he's been assigned is to look at this area of state-owned banking. And so we are saying, while there are already other state-owned banking, let's focus on their development, and if need be, also new institutions to emerge. Also, again, on development finance, we say, we need to have also policies that deliberately say no public institutions should provide high interest rates to support small businesses, to support cooperative enterprise, to support even industrial development. That we should look at low interest, or sometimes called concessionary loans, being a principle, a must, not a discretion from time to time. We are also supporting the macroeconomic proposals, policy proposals that are contained in the document before this conference, which basically says that we, among other things, we have to combat and provide an alternative to a neoliberal fiscal austerity framework. That we need to have a macroeconomic policy that can support our program for structural economic transformation. And this will include the role of the Reserve Bank, so that it plays more developmental role than the current status quo, which is basically a neoliberal macroeconomic framework. Comrades, the other area we look at was the basic income grant. Again, this is an area that the party has been repeatedly calling for its introduction, to ensure that no South African is left below an agreed basic minimum income threshold, and ultimately that no one can fall below a certain poverty level, what we call the upper bound poverty level. So this is an issue that is immediately compelling now in the current situation. The working class face itself with the persistent high levels of poverty. And also that when it is introduced, it is needed to replace the COVID era social relief distress grant. So we know, comrades, that this is one battle that also class contestation is very, very high, because neoliberals are generally opposed to this framework of a basic income grant, at least in the way that we are proposing, as a universal basic income grant, as opposed to means tested. Means tested means that you exclude some parts of the poor working class from others. You know, how much are you earning? How much you earn? If you earn 10 rand above, you are excluded, and things like that. So universality of the principle is that it should be universal, but there's a compelling case why it should be so, because it will reduce bureaucratic costs of administering, so that instead of money going straight to the people who deserves it, it end up in a bureaucratic, paperwork and so on. And also that we should link the basic income universal to other programs in a form of coordination and so on. You know, one example could be a public employment programs. So public employment programs, which I'm going to talk about later in the end, is linked as well with, should be seen to be complementing rather than being seen as a substitute. Okay. But our position as well, we express our opposition to the proposals of the National Treasury. Instead of basic income grant, is proposing something called family or household scheme, which once again, it's another form of a means testing that excludes women and entrench patriarchal relations in the household. Okay. Then I pass the universal, okay. I think I forgot that we also said this must also be a campaign. We should drive this in a campaign mode. Already there is a campaign going on with the popular support of a lot of civil society organizations. The party should continue to participate in this campaign. The other area, comrades, which is related to the fact that 30 years, almost 30 years since our April 94, ours is still a monopoly, capitalist-dominated economy. And that little movement has happened, if any, to broaden ownership and control of the economy by the people as a whole, as the Freedom Charter is saying, rather than by the few. And this is an issue, if we have noticed that also the president of the ANC also mentioned as something that we could engage to a proposed summit of the alliance or of civil society. I'm not sure what was the broad representation of that, but I assume it is an alliance summit where this issue should feature strongly on the agenda. So what is our take? In terms of resolving, we first and foremost say that obviously ending monopoly domination is not something you can do at once, one swoop, then a monopoly has disappeared. It is a struggle that also depends on the class power of the working class in the state, but also on the ground. And some of the issues are already contained even in the 2019 manifesto. For instance, the manifesto says there must be a policy and legislation for extension of company ownership to a broad base of workers through worker ownership funds or similar schemes. Sometimes these schemes can be called employee share schemes and so on. We need to look at that and see, in what way could that actually broaden that worker ownership of control. It's an issue that requires engagement with labor as well. The other way of breaking monopoly is to support as well the breaking up of monopolies, something we said at the last Congress, the 14th Congress, breaking up monopolies. Sometimes the monopolies, they call them unbundling and so on. But it is the class character of how you unbundle that should be an issue. And in the resolution, we call for a support of development of industrial worker co-ops, which are formed out of a conversion of a private capitalist company into a worker-owned and even a community-owned enterprise. So that's a proposal there. And support measures can include public finance by IDC or UIF resources to promote active takeover of private-owned enterprise by the workers, and where possible by communities. So we really need to look at that and also strengthen our measures. Are our measures enough? Is anti-competition rules enough to break up monopolies? What is it that is blocking our way to break up monopolies in many sectors? Because we know that their stranglehold suffocate the co-ops, small businesses at large. So we need to do that in ways that socialize the economy rather than further commodify the economy. And I will say, comrades, it does not exclude some of this being taken over into the hands of the state, because there may be responsibilities through a form of nationalization, which we call socialization as the party. Comrades, on public employment, we are saying that, and we have taken strong resolutions. Public employment has been with us in our resolutions. So first, let's reaffirm those resolutions on public employment program. But with a new, more stronger content that the quality of the employment obviously is not only what they produce, but the labor they reward. That the labor that they reward must be a decent work pay, rather than what we have experienced, at least so far. And this is very, very important element of advancing our agenda for the right to work, as the Freedom Charter says, the right to work, in which to get a job is your right. Whether there's a market, the capitalists cannot employ you or what, you've got a right to work. Thola msebenzi, usebenze. So that is the quickest way to employ hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And that we need to link this public employment with other programs of the party, like township economy, village economy, and our campaign for basic income grants, so that it is not lost and it is not conflated with the basic income grant. So that's the point. Okay, the last one, comrades, which we wish to highlight from the resolution is on the cooperatives. And then the resolution basically says that as a party, we must now begin to play an active, much more stronger part. I think the political report says we must champion the cooperative movement. and that, among other things, we can organize a conference on cooperatives that will focus on the central task of building a democratic and socialist cooperative movement in South Africa, focusing on the workers and communities with a strong backing of the trade union movement. So in other words, co-ops are not out there separate from other working class movements. They must be integrated and become part of a one whole of this broader message of building the socialist movement. The co-ops must be embedded in that movement because essentially they are our building blocks for the socialism we seek to create. The other issue is that we need also then to say, what then can we focus at? What are the areas as a party we want to identify? Because to say cooperatives is not enough. We need to look at what our programmatic interventions, do they contribute to the program of the entire program of the party, or what? So we are suggesting there the proposals from the commission, including that we should focus on building a significant cooperative banking sector, network of community-owned stores, including cooperative housing and worker cooperatives in our communities and even at factories and agriculture. And that the party districts also have a very critical role to play to work with the cooperative movements and the unions to organize burial societies and stokvels for purposes of building a national network, cooperative network of these grassroots initiatives in our country. Finally, comrades, and it's my last point, that we should help to strengthen the work of the DTCA. We received the report in the organizational report, and that we should work with the DTCA, Doratamana Cooperative Agency, as it transits to become a membership-based institution. In other words, we should work along that direction. Thank you, comrades. Mandla!
Comrade, this is a close